All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. And Sunday, if you want to call the roll.
Chair Holmquist.
Here.
Alder Moore. Here. Mr. Humberg.
Here.
Mr. Stein.
Here.
Mr. Dorschel.
Here.
Ms. Fox. Ms. Mr. Ganser. Sorry.
Here, either way.
Ms. Thomas is excused.
All right, and the first item is, if I can get my computer to work for me, is approval of the minutes from September 11th, 2017. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any edits? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And minutes have passed. Chief,
Yep.
this thing isn't working too hot for me, thank. So is there anybody that wishes to appear on an item that's not on the agenda tonight? Are you here for an item that's on? Perfect, all right. Seeing none, I'm sure he's coming for this. Yep. So seeing nobody here for appearances on an item not on the agenda, we'll close the appearance section, move on to unfinished business. 5A is a consideration of action on resolution 1009-2017 to adopt the zoning code amendments for the 2016 recodification project and recommend approval to the city council. And Sunny.
So again, this is just the last step in this entire recodification process. Plan Commission approval, once again, is required in statutes because tonight is the public hearing on the issue. And there were some comments last time on 6 items for minor changes, and I sent out this summary on Saturday morning. If you didn't get a chance to look at it, I'll just summarize. Item number 1 was clarifying the regulations for earth station dish antennas, and the request was to move that section that says that these requirements don't apply to earth station dish and antennas that are under 2 feet in diameter, so that was put at the beginning of the section. Item number 2 was regarding the historic conservation ordinance, and there was some concern about the language that says when changes to a landmark property are being reviewed, it should also consider changes to, or it should also consider landmarks that are nearby to the site. So in my comments there, I wrote that this might be applicable when there's a historic district recognized by the city, which we don't currently have any, but could designate a historic district in the future. And in that case, you might want to consider the architecture of the surrounding properties when determining changes for one property. Number 3, there was some clarification to make sure that people still understood that applications for Plan Commission are due 2 weeks prior, but that I'm required to send a public hearing notice 5 days before the meeting. Number 4 was access management guidelines. I added a second line of text under the title to clarify that it's intended for commercial and multifamily properties, not every lot in the city like single-family residential lots. Number 5, lot coverage. Again, at the September 11th meeting, there was discussion about whether we still wanted to keep that 40% lot coverage ratio. My recommendation is yes, we should keep it. It's different than the 65% impervious surface limit, which we just added. If you removed the 40% lot coverage, for example, you could technically cover 65% of your lot in building footprints if you had no other impervious surface on your lot, and 40% thereby would limit the mass of the buildings to 40% of the lot instead of 65%. There were some questions about that, of whether we have had a lot of requests from property owners for variances from that 40% limit, and my comments note that I have never had a request for that since I've been dealing with the ZBA since 2011, and I'm not aware of any. There have been a few for variance requests to the accessory structure lot coverage limit of 1,000 square feet per lot, which is a different regulation. And then finally, number 6, some more clarifications requested on the historic conservation ordinance regarding the ability of any person to nominate a landmark. I summarized the public hearing process that would happen if someone other than the property owner nominated a property for landmark designation. It would go through a few public hearings, one at Landmarks Commission and one at City Council. It would include a Class 2 notice published in the newspaper twice, as well as mailings to the individual property owners within a certain distance and the owner of the property. The owner would have time to appear before those bodies that are making the decisions and express any approval or disapproval of the nomination. And the city council would have final determination on whether to approve or deny the nomination. And additionally, the landmarks designation, if it were approved, is recorded at the Dane County Register of Deeds office. So that's a mechanism where any future prospective buyers of a property would be advised of the landmark status before they purchase a property. And also an appeals process is in place if the property owner was later seeking to remove that landmark status. One final comment. If there are any changes to the items in this language tonight, it can be approved with those recommendations, and it would go to City Council, and they would have the final decision on whether to approve it with changes or as written.
All right. Any questions or concerns regarding these updates? Chris?
Excuse me, I still question why we need the or nearby in here. I understand your explanation that if we have a historic district, it could be appropriate, but we don't. And it would seem to me at that point in time, the historic district would have verbiage in there that would tell about things nearby. Right now, I'm concerned because somebody can nominate any home, say that home gets nominated and gets accepted, and now the new construction has to conform not only to that, but the nearby properties. I don't understand why we're talking about nearby properties and how that would impact people that didn't choose to be a landmark, and how it would affect them. And I know it gives the commission some discretion, but discretion for what? To do what? I don't see the purpose of having or nearby in the sentence. And if there's no purpose and there could be confusion, I think it should be eliminated.
And for clarification, make sure I understand it correctly, the nearby is nearby landmarks, not nearby in generality.
Correct.
Other thoughts or comments?
I was just looking to get that clarified. Well, so do you hear what they, so Chris, they're talking about nearby landmarks?
Mm-hmm. I did.
So what difference, so if 3 buildings down is historic school, how does that relate to the building we're talking about? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And there's a lot of different reasons to have a landmark designated. You might, that's a perfect example. There might be a historical home with a certain style of architecture, and 3 doors down there might be a school that was nominated because of its historical significance. Now, why would the construction on one have to be in the same architectural style or compatible architectural style to the other? Because they could be 2 totally different purposes. The way it's worded, the case of new construction, whether the exterior of such construction would be in harmony with the external appearance of other landmarks on the site or nearby.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it feels like, and I'm not criticizing this, Sonia, but it's kind of like planning commission speak. You know, we want to be able to, everything's supposed to jive with what's down the street and this and that, which is totally irrelevant in this case, so I agree with you.
And I totally agree with the historical district. Mm-hmm. We absolutely want to make it a cohesive district, but in this case, this is not about a historical district.
Mm-hmm.
Other thoughts?
Well, it just seems like, to his point, that if we were going to at some point establish districts, we don't have them now. But if we were, then that would be an entirely new addition to the code rather than kind of woven in at that time. If we decided that was something that we wanted to do as a city, that would be something that we'd want to establish as a separate item and altogether in the code, as how a district would be defined, as an example, as opposed to having it woven in this way.
Others? Sue?
I'm inclined to think that makes more sense too, because I think when you just take even my street where there's there are a couple of historic homes, landmarks, and houses near them aren't necessarily in harmony with them, and it seems like it puts kind of unnecessary restrictions on homeowners. and it's hard for me to think of where we would put a historic district. That seems a little, I guess I agree. This seems like something that should be addressed at that time rather than as a standalone thing that applies just in general, I think.
Sunny, given the discussion, if the removal of the nearby landmarks were removed, do you see any concerns from either your serving on staffing this, staffing landmarks, and staffing ZBA? Do you see any concerns given this discussion of removing the nearby?
I think I'm okay with it at removing that language at this point. Just as a little bit of background, the Landmarks Commission is exploring and it has expressed interest in applying to become a certified local government, which is a Landmarks Commission recognized by the Wisconsin Historical Society. It makes them eligible to receive grants up to $25,000 every year, among other things. So part of becoming a certified local government requires certain language to be in the ordinance. I don't think that having nearby in the ordinance is one of those requirements. The second issue about any person being able to nominate a property is, but there are other changes in that certified local government process that would need to come back to Plan Commission in the future. So I think removing them at this time and then having further discussion when that comes forward would be okay.
And I mean, I think I share a similar kind of idea of, it's one thing if you have a community where you have a series of potential landmarks
Right.
that you want to be able to, as that collection, be able to put them together in a way that references the harmony of those landmarks together as a unit, compared to, I think, what we have in Monona, which is a lot more of kind of single site.
That's not really what this conversation
Yeah.
is about, though, is it? I mean, this conversation is, I'm nominating this home, and the board is looking at it, and this is saying that it, needs to jive with the other homes in the area, which is completely irrelevant.
Well, the other landmarks in the area. So that's where
Or
I
the
think,
other, okay, even the
yeah.
other landmarks in the area, it's still irrelevant. I mean, you're not going to change it, or like Chris said, this is Baroque and this is, contemporary or prairie. You're not going to deny it because it's not Baroque like the other one.
Yeah. Do you need a motion?
Plus, I don't think we have a lot of homes in the Baroque style in Monona. Just a minute, let me think. No.
0. All right. Is anybody willing to put a motion together for a change in that?
You can do it all at the time.
We can do it all at that time, but maybe we can note the edit now.
It's notice for one motion for the whole thing.
All right. So jot it down on your paper if you have a consideration
I
for
do.
this item. Other than section 2, how about some of the other sections? Chris?
I have one question on the last one, and Sonia, I had sent you, you had asked if we had anything that needed a little more research, and that was on the nomination. If somebody else nominates my home, and I thought we had something in the verbiage way back that if that happened and the homeowner really didn't want to do it, there's something where the city would have to, if the city felt strong enough about it being a landmark, they would have to buy that property.
Yeah, I read back through the ordinance, 'cause that rang a bell with
Right.
me as well, and I think what we were looking at was, in your packets, it would be page 72 of the Schedule A attachment, Section M, and it's titled Action on Permit Application. And I think near the bottom it says, the Common Council can consider acquisition or preservation of the landmark or landmark site. So I think this conversation came up when people were casually discussing changes that might occur to the Frank Alice House or San Damiano. And if through the entire process, the Landmarks Commission and the City Council thought it was necessary to preserve it, or to prevent demolition, for example, the only way to do that would be through acquisition.
So it doesn't apply to the entire section, only that small part? Or is it broader?
You mean, does it only?
Well, if somebody wants to nominate Griff's home for landmark status, and he doesn't want to demolish it, but he really doesn't want to be a landmark, would the city come in and need to?
No, they would not be required to buy it.
Okay, so and then at that point, there is a taking of value, because as soon as you're a landmark, you're very restricted on what you can do with your property. And it puts a lot of restrictions on the exterior, what you can do, a lot of the things, so it isn't worth as much once somebody makes your home a landmark, unless you truly feel you want that to be a landmark, or find the person that does. So I'm conflicted here with taking away somebody's value if they don't want it done. And they don't want that home to be a landmark. Because I thought that applied for more, but you're saying it applies just if you want to get a demo permit, then the city has to
Or if
look
the
at it?
city wants to impose certain restrictions, like preventing demo or requiring them to do something for preservation.
Well, again, so if Griff's home was nominated, now he wants to do an exterior remodel, and he doesn't want to do it in the same fashion as Landmark Commission asked him to do it, does that invoke that sentence, or is he just out of luck and he has to eat it and just live it? He wants to put a porch on the back, and they don't think it fits the architecture. What can he do with his home?
Chris, are you saying this is after someone else nominated and it became a landmark?
I'm saying that's the potential. After somebody else nominated Griff's home and it became a landmark, sorry to keep picking on you, Griff. and it became a landmark, now he's limited on what he can do to his home compared to what was before. He had a wide open palette. Now he doesn't have that palette available, and that's what worries me about somebody else nominating another person's home as a landmark if it's not voluntary with that person, if they're not participating in it. That bothers me. I think it's a taking of value of somebody's property, potentially. Not always, but it's potentially a taking of value.
Well, I guess I would assume that if someone else other than the homeowner nominated the property, that the Landmarks Commission would take into account whether or not the actual homeowner was interested in that occurring as part of the overall application and nomination process. And if the homeowner was really against it, I would hope that the Landmarks Commission and their guidelines wouldn't necessarily pit them against the homeowner in terms of their decision.
I would hope so, but there's nothing in here. If you said that the owner had to agree to this, that would be fine, but there's nothing in here. Somebody else can nominate it, they can accept it, the city can make it a landmark the way it's written right now. So you've just done something to my property.
I think some of the purpose of that is, regardless of the homeowner of that site, the purpose of establishing landmark status is the preservation for the city as a whole. So it's not necessarily for preservation of that individual homeowner.
Sure.
It would be the value of what is it that and right now we're talking about a house. It doesn't necessarily need to be a house. It could be something different. That the value is to the city and the cultural importance, or the architectural importance, or the various ways that can be, that they're determining that it meets a certain status that we want to preserve ongoing.
Right.
So the idea of our appeal process, so let's say it's Sonny's house, we'll stop picking on Griff, and it goes through and then Sonny wants to tear the thing down or make a modification. There's a way that there's a way to appeal that process to be able to continue to move forward despite it being nominated and accepted as a landmark in the city, is the way that I've understood it to be.
I think that's terrible. I think the application should require the owner's signature, the application to begin with, which makes this irrelevant. I mean, this language in here.
And so that's the point of a landmark status, is that it's not an individual homeowner decision. It's you're setting up a group that is determining what landmarks or what potential landmarks have value beyond just the individual property owner. Sue?
Well, I understand that aspect, and that's the whole point of it. But at the same time, I think it does present a taking of value, very potential. I mean, I'll take the international style homes, for example. We have a few of them. A couple of them have already been kind of modified, a couple of them haven't been. If a person would want to sell one of those homes to a young family moving in, or a young couple, they may well want to make significant modifications, and they may not be willing to buy it and pay the top price that it might be worth. This, to the point that's been made, if there are restrictions on it. So is there some way to put, I don't know how you would even determine this, but language on what value is lost by it being a landmark? I mean, I don't know if anybody ever does that, but it does, I'm a little torn because I see the community value in restoring some landmarks, and I can think of some in Madison as well, the Frank Riley House, things like that. And some of them you would hope that someone that would buy a property like that wouldn't want to change it, but some of them are pretty limited in terms of their design inside, and yet the land they're on is of exceptional value, and or potential it could be. So it doesn't seem fair to the person's kind of property ownership. It's like eminent domain. It's kind of what it is. I mean, it's very similar to just the city deciding, right,
Without paying for it.
without paying for it, right.
Sonny?
So there are some model ordinances that we might have looked at and examples that have language kind of along the lines of what you were just talking about. It's not included in our draft now, and now would not be the appropriate time to insert those, but there are examples where it's just a series of process and procedures that effectively are just a delay that allow the community to decide if this is an important community-wide cultural resource that's worth preserving, and then ultimately the property owner can still do what they want after following those processes and procedures. And I think also if you're on the state register of historic places, which is a whole nother level than just local Monona landmark status, the property owner still has those avenues to ultimately do what they want. But one example of getting around some of the regulations in one of the ordinances was after a period of like 3 months or something and discussion with the city council, if they can't come to mutual agreement, then the permit must be granted to do what the property owner requested. So there's language like that that we could consider in the future. If tonight, if the language is just removed, or if you add that the property owner's signature is required, we could start with that and then discuss further if the Landmarks Commission brings forward those requests.
If we alter this language, is there any, does it lead to any concerns with seeking status for what the Landmarks Commission is seeking?
Not at this time. I think we have certain requirements. If we want to get grant funding next year, we have to have an ordinance approved at a certain point. I don't remember what it is. It might be November. But I don't think now there's enough time to discuss that and make a decision. So going with removal of the language at this point would be okay. And if we need to move quickly to bring something else forward, I'm not sure if we have those deadline restrictions or not. We can talk about that later.
So here it might be the addition of the property owner's signature, and it wouldn't jeopardize, and if there were other language that needed to come back to allow the application status to move forward, we could do that. So, okay. Chris?
I like that for tonight, and don't get me wrong, I love the ability of the city to decide this has cultural significance to us. I think that's really important, but if the land or the property owner doesn't agree, then there has to be some negotiation. I don't think we can just come in and say, well, that's too bad. So at that point, then we have to put our money where our mouth is. It's that important. We need to negotiate with that property owner. And I think in 99% of the cases, the property owner will be on board and be proud of it. But I just don't want to create an ordinance that basically can take away somebody's value like that.
All right.
I think that's great. So we can add that signature without a problem.
That was one of the suggestions, to add that now, and
So-
if they need to have different language with the process spelled out to be able to seek the additional status they're looking for grant funding, we can bring that back at a future date. Sue?
Well, I was just trying to see where you might add that, and I guess in that middle sentence, notwithstanding, maybe.
No, I'm thinking section E on page 70, section E under nomination, and anybody can nominate, but a property owner's signature will be required.
Oh, that'd be the cleanest place to put it, I
Yeah.
guess, and then the easiest place to take it out if we put in other contingencies.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
All right. Any other questions or concerns on this item? All right.
Just briefly on lot coverage. So 40% is the building footprint and 65% is impervious cover. So that adds patios, driveways, and all that.
Correct.
All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, is anybody willing to make a motion?
Move approval as written by staff, and then add Schedule A, page 70, section E, that the property owner's signature will be required to be on the submission. And on page 72, subset 2, remove or nearby.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
You got to pick one.
Third.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you, guys. Item passes, and we'll move on to new business. Okay. So 6A is a public hearing on the request by Walmart, represented by SGA Design Group, for revisions for approval of architectural design zoning permit number 2/16/2017 and signage plans, sign permit S/20/2017 for the property and building at 2151 Royal Avenue. And you could step up to the podium, introduce yourself, and then maybe walk through a brief description of what you're hoping to accomplish.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Corey Jacobson. I'm one of the co-store managers at the Walmart there. I've been there for about 2 years. What they plan to do is change a little bit of the logo and the painting on the outside of the building. The logo itself is like a flat gray right now. They want to change it to the bright blue, the yellow spark. They want to put a orange little logo for the pickup today, if anybody's known what that is. We're going to online grocery where people can come to the store, pick up their online groceries, we bring it out to their vehicles, such of that nature. The brick will be the same color as it is right now, so we will not be painting any of the brick. It'd just be the overstructure and stuff of that nature. It'll go to one of 3 colors of gray. Other than that, the outside of the building structure, that covers that, and then the sign itself changes very, very minimal, goes to the blue, and that's it for the outside of the building. Inside of the building will be upgraded, we'll get electronics of the future, and that's about the main thing. Then we'll get some new shelving. They'll paint the inside of the building, and that's about it. It's not a full-blown remodel because our store is in great shape, but it does need some sprucing up.
All right, and we can close the public hearing and go on to 6B, which is consideration of action on the request by Walmart, owned by SGA Design Group, for revisions to the approval of architectural design zoning permit 2/16/2017 and signage plans S/20/2017 for the property at 2151 Royal Avenue. And Sunny, if you'll kick it off.
This is before the Plan Commission because it's a substantial revision to what was approved as far as architectural elevations for the Walmart when it was approved. The staff report recommends approval with one condition, that the brick on the building shall not be painted.
All right. Commissioners, any questions?
I think it's great. I don't have any problem with that. It's worth noting, and maybe it's just a typo, but that's an increase of 10% in the signage square footage, not 1%.
Thank you.
It's fine. Looks good. It's fine. It's great.
All right, others? Nothing? Sue?
I like it. I think it's a nice update. And so there's more blue kind of around. It's not like it's the only thing. When you look at their stores online with this kind of background, it looks a little more updated.
All right, anybody else?
None.
All right. Seeing none, anybody care to make a motion?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
You got to pick.
Aye.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks, sir. 6C is public hearing on request by Raywood Development LLC and Phoenix Nuclear Labs requesting an allowance to install exterior mechanical equipment without a screening enclosure at 6915 A Raywood Road, case number 2/17/2017. And Dale, I believe, is going to recuse himself and then represent this item.
Yes. And honestly, I have very little to say. If you read my email to Sonia, it's really clear. In multiple situations, and I'm not here to throw the utilities under the bus, but it's one of my biggest pet peeves in real estate development. And I'm sparing the commission, because if I was sitting over there, I'd want to be spared of the photographs that I took when I wrote this email and then decided not to send them to Sonia and not to bring them in. But the disrepair of screening in our community and throughout Dayton County is over the top. And I stated in my note that aesthetics is about the building owner, not about whether something has a screen around it or not. And I struggle with the concept of our utilities destroying our drives. I went to a project today to look at a sign. There's one place for an effective sign for that business, and there are 4 transformers at that location, and literally no place for them to identify their business. This is not in Monona, this is in another city. So, and then regarding Phoenix, this is a 2-month lease, and they're using a chiller rather than tearing up and going out to the main and bringing in a larger pipe so they can take this with them. And I don't want to ask them to spend they're spending an incredible amount of money retrofitting the inside of this building to do what they do. And I don't want to ask them to spend another $5,000 to put up a screen that I don't want there covering up the utility. So we got a gray utility going in front of a gray building. And why would I put a gray fence in front of it?
All right, and we'll close the public hearing section and move on to item D, which is consideration of action on a request by Raywood Development LLC and Phoenix Nuclear Labs requesting allowance to install exterior mechanical equipment without a screening enclosure at 6515 or 6915 Raywood Road. Sign?
Typically, the Plan Commission requires all outdoor storage, refuse, recyclables, mechanical equipment to be stored or screened, including if it's on a rooftop. We require architectural elements like roof parapets or wall parapets to screen it. In this particular case, I recommended approval of not screening it because the property is located in a commercial industrial park where mechanical equipment is common and expected component of business operations. Its setback is a considerable distance from the right-of-way. It's not located in a retail business environment like right in front of a building on Monona Drive, for example. As Dale mentioned, it's a gray mechanical unit in front of a gray building, and its size, shape, and color I think will blend into the building, whereas a taller fence or landscaping might look more out of the ordinary than a mechanical unit. And then I don't think I made it clear in the staff report that the second attachment was submitted originally as discussion of what screening could look like. So again, the owner has requested not to have any screening, and originally there was some discussion about, it looks like chain link fence with slats or a metal fence with some arborvitae.
Questions or comments? Chris?
Did you hear correctly, it's a 2-month lease?
2-year, did I say 2 months?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it'd be over by now. So we really don't even need to talk about this. It's a 2-year lease, and quite honestly, they are looking at, and I don't know if you people are familiar with Phoenix Nuclear Labs or what they do, but they are going to be a really big deal internationally, and they are looking at relocating their facility building, and I mean, it would just be tremendous if there was they'd love to stay in Monona. There's probably no way for us to accomplish that. If anybody has any ideas, let me know. But anyways, I think they'll be there longer than 2 years just because the building process is going to be very overwhelming for them because of their needs. So, maybe they're there for 3 years, maybe they're there for 4, I'm not sure. They're kitty corner from me, for those of you who don't know that already.
Any other questions, Chris?
Two comments. One, as you well know, we don't control public utilities. I agree with you on all the transformers, telephone pads, cable pads, everything. We have no control over that.
No, I understand, I
So,
totally understand that.
I think it's an issue on every site, and all you can get down to is when you build that project to maybe keep an eye to it. And we can ask questions, where's your transformer going to be, and ask for clarification on things like that, but it's an eternal problem. As far as screening, I still believe in screening. I think in most cases it's appropriate. In this case, that thing's gray, and it probably is less noticeable than the fence or something else. And it's a short-term lease. I would just suggest we add in finding a fact for that this is a short-term lease also.
And would it be helpful to add the word non-precedent setting, or, because that was my only concern too, was because I agree with you that in a lot of cases, I think you do want it, even though I understand what you're saying about the disrepair, but I think in this case, it isn't necessary, and I drove out and looked at it, too, and I think it's appropriate to not have it screened here, but just so it's real clear that we don't have other people coming in expecting, I mean, and it might be that if we have somebody else with the same kind of situation, that we would say, yeah, you don't need a screen, but I'd rather not give up that.
I know I'm recused, but if I understand it correctly, there is not an ordinance requiring it, so this is by planning commission. Is that correct?
I think there are different sections that vaguely reference screening of outdoor equipment, but there's not a single line that says
But it's required.
it must all be screened by this type of fence or that type of landscaping.
Not the type, but that there will be screens, right? On the, that area of Broadway.
And it doesn't specifically reference any particular location like Broadway.
No, the plan for, what do we call that area?
Broadway corridor plan.
Broadway corridor plan, I
this-
believe, talks about it.
This area is outside of that plan.
Is it? Because I know the Super America, I believe, is inside, so then this is out.
That was it, yeah, that area is included.
And by the way, I'm not opposed to screening, I get it, I understand it, and it has merit in a lot of situations, but I do want to put the emphasis on property owners, because the photographs I had were appalling, and they happen to be, majority of them are small businesses like mine, and multifamily is a real problem. You know, they built the screens, and then and I have photographs of screens where they use it to dry their clothes. That's a business off of Monona Drive. I mean, you know, it's kind of a joke. I mean, we need to, if screening is required in situations, somehow it needs to be maintained. But
Yeah, so I think the concern around property maintenance is a separate issue, an ongoing issue, both residential and business.
Mhm.
I don't think you'll get any disagreement from this commission or others that we have concerns about that, and we're trying to tackle that item from both ends, both the residential as well as multifamily and business. So it's not an easy task. Griff?
Well, I think the findings of fact are important in establishing or limiting the precedent that this might possibly have for future cases. But if we make these specific findings of fact as to this exception, I think that will sufficiently cut back on future proposals.
Yeah,
All right.
that
Is there
makes sense.
someone willing to make a motion?
Move approval, findings of fact as written by staff, add findings of fact, number 4, that this is a short-term lease.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move on to 7A, staff report regarding staff development projects. And yeah, why don't you jump in there?
Upcoming meetings, October 23rd, 2 weeks from now, we will have the, some outstanding items on the Yahara Commons riverfront development, including their landscaping and stormwater plans. Those were 2 conditions that were required to come back to Plan Commission. The next meeting after that's November 13th, and I made a note that we might consider tentatively canceling the November 27th meeting. It's proximity to the Thanksgiving holiday. If anything important comes up, we could have that meeting, but I'll try to work with applicants to direct them to other meetings. Other potential applications, the Woodspring Suites Hotel, I shared information from other municipalities and newspaper articles with concerns about that particular brand and did express, share those concerns with the applicant. We'll be meeting with the police chief and to discuss them further. And then B, Craig Frank Multifamily Development on Monona Drive. Still haven't received official word whether or not that is moving forward. He had some time constraints on his option to purchase the property that I think have expired. So at this time, that's not moving forward. That's it.
All right. And B, which is Plan Commission request for information concerning development projects.
Are we able to speak, for example, to Woodspring in this kind of forum?
If it is a request for information phrase, then you can ask a question if it's gathering some additional information that Sunny's able to share. If not, she'll let us know. And
Okay, I'll pass other than to encourage, if anybody has not read with what Sonia sent out, I encourage to make sure everybody reads it diligently, and if you expand on that and do some research on your own, there's a lot of information out there.
And Sunny, was the information that was shared out, was that included in a packet previously?
No, it wasn't.
Email.
It was an email, a forward from a person named Anoop Patel.
It's from September
You're right.
8th.
Okay. Given that at some point, it might make sense to include it as information in the packet, so that way people don't have to hand in emails. Okay. Sue?
Yeah, I guess, maybe this will come up when the end of the O'Hara Commons stormwater discussion, but the timeline, I'm surprised that Chase Bank has signs up saying that they'll be there until January 20th, and I thought the reason we had a single meeting to approve the Radio Shack building was because they were going to move pretty quickly, and I thought we were under some timeline, so I'm just curious about that.
Their exact deadline or their exact date of moving out is still up in the air. It was important to get all of the local approvals completed so that we weren't the ones holding up their move. It sounds like there might be some other federal banking requirements with notification of their new location for their customers. And
Does that have an impact on the total project if it's that late, or is
it's likely that it will.
Do you need help carrying like cash over to the new location or anything?
You want to volunteer?
I'm always available.
Any other questions? Chris?
How's the sewer project there coming?
No major problems as far as I know.
Doesn't that go under Chase?
The existing one does. That has to be done before the building can be demoed.
Yeah.
The existing sewer goes under Chase. The new one
Right.
goes down the new right-of-way, the one
And
that
then I
we're
assume they'll
Okay,
just
that's right,
attach it and
yeah.
close off the old one, is that what they do?
Yeah.
They are,
Underway.
they're mostly on schedule, maybe a day behind or so.
It's going well.
Mhm.
Good.
I had a question regarding the Radio Shack building and what was approved, and were there concerns that they ran into that may have caused them to deviate from what was approved?
So I drove by when I got back on maybe Tuesday, and I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. They were approved to remove the blue metal roof. Was there something else you noticed?
I thought it was all the siding that there was a concern that they were just going to repair minor.
Oh, it's gone, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe they were just actually, it was the
it was new
Touch up.
siding.
They were
ephes.
gonna
They were
leave the
just going to
ephes.
repair the ephes, right.
Oh,
'Cause we brought
So
it
if
to
they
all
install brand-new ephes, that's still consistent with the plans,
think
I
we
wouldn't
should
have a
fine
concern
it.
with
I think we
that.
should fine with it, yeah.
but I can check.
Okay.
Must have
I'll
seen,
take-
they
I'll
must
take
have
another
seen
look
at
it.
more
Yeah.
damage
Yeah.
than they originally
Yeah, I
thought.
didn't
or
notice.
something.
And that
Right.
it looks like they had some other
Right.
pieces up, so
Okay,
it
I'll
just
take a look at it.
struck me as
Especially
different
since
than
she
what-
stood here and said that we've inspected it all, it's in great shape.
Okay.
That's what
I didn't
had
even
me
think
a little-
about that. I mean, I noticed it was all stripped down, but I forgot that they were gonna leave that.
So maybe they just ran into more problems than they thought. So. Any other questions folks have? All right. Our favorite item. Item 8, motion for adjournment.
You adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second?
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thanks, guys.